Welcome, my friends. Welcome to my world. You're tuned into This Week in Homelessness with Daniel McDonald. That is me. This is my brand new podcast, Series 1, Episode 1, the inaugural edition. So you can be part of history or infamy, depending on your perspective, and you can be the judge once this is over. Anyway, this is Week in Homelessness. Today is Tuesday, February the 18th, 2020. I hope to do this about once a week or so, depending on time. That seems to be the most pressing issue nowadays. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to get in touch. Info@homelesspolice.com, and that goes right to me. I'd be glad to answer your questions, whether you like this or even if you hate this. Or even if you think I look better on my podcast, you can also see me on YouTube and like your opinions. So we're going to be talking about all things homelessness, current issues, news, and analysis of current topics. We'll have guests on here, I hope. We've had a few volunteers so far. I look forward to them joining us, and each of them I promise to treat you like a guest in my own living room. My style is one of civilized discussion, like you were a guest in my house, and I don't want to do finger pointing or yelling. If I agree, or particularly if I don't agree with you, then your point of view is welcome, and we can have a friendly discussion, even if we completely disagree. And particularly if you disagree with me or anything I say, I'd love to hear your opinion and tell me how I'm wrong and what your take is. Anyway, just a little bit about me. I've been working in police homeless outreach. Yes, believe it or not, my job full-time is as a police officer. I spent the last 8 years, or about 16,000 hours, doing that. My job is problem solving, not arrests. I haven't made an arrest since I started this role, and hope to keep it that way. So that's my role in police homeless outreach. Problem solving, not necessarily an advocate. I may sound like one at times, but I solve problems many times. That is lack of housing, lack of identification, lack of income, lack of housing, lack of affordable housing. I have actually visited one place that does not have a lack of affordable housing. Everyone is housed, and if you can guess where that is, I went there about 2 years ago, and you can visit there anytime you would like. It's a little cold for me, that's a clue, but if you think you know the answer to that, I'll give you a shout out. Info@homelesspolice.com if you can guess the correct answer. So far, no one yet has guessed that. So anyway, what else do I do? I'm also a homeless consultant. You can hire me if you're having issues, or if your police department isn't quite sure how to handle homelessness. Panhandling, which I call the first cousin of homelessness. We'll get into that in a future show. My theories and thoughts on that. Give me a yell or via email. Be glad to tell you what works and what doesn't work, but if you're watching, you've probably realized that you can't arrest away the problem. We will reserve the arrests for the real criminals that are committing more serious crimes, such as robbing banks, breaking into cars, etc. So I thought I'd separate the information from misinformation. There's plenty of that going around these days, and offer my thoughts and opinions. And I appreciate the about 2,000 people that liked, responded, retweeted, commented on Twitter, my social media of choice. You can follow me at Homeless Police. And when I thought about starting a podcast, which is also on YouTube, to kind of use as a platform for my thoughts and opinions and hear other person's thoughts and opinions. Anyway, let's get to future shows here, what we're going to be talking about in the future. Some issues I would like to discuss. I've also had some volunteers for guests in this area, such as the role of the private sector in homelessness, particularly private sector Faith-based nonprofits, there's plenty of room for them. Government doesn't have to be the only vehicle driving homeless solutions. Oftentimes, others can do it quicker, cheaper, faster, better than the government. We'll be talking about the criminalization of homelessness. I'm on the front lines of that. I spent about 8 years, 16,000 hours trying not to arrest homeless people. So far, so good. And you kind of think, isn't that kind of funny? You're a cop and you don't arrest people. Like, almost like, how long have I been asleep? What year is this? What planet am I on? Is Alan Funt, for those of you who can candid camera, can remember back that far? Is he going to jump out from behind a bush and say it's a trick? Actually, I'll talk about that later on, but that was kind of a leap. It didn't take as long as I figured it would. Hi, I'm from the police. I'm here to help you. If you're homeless, they were kind of stumped at first, but once they realized I was serious, it didn't take that long, only about 3 weeks. I remember one of my very first clients, and I called them clients. There are many pejoratives for homeless people. I don't use them. They're my clients. And Don was his name, and he was a veteran, and he was one of the first people I housed. I remember him saying, "You passed the test." Well, what do you mean, Don? Well, we weren't sure whether you were serious or not. This is kind of a big leap for the police to actually be helping us. So, and word spread that I was serious. And I have a saying that I've developed that if you're homeless, you can tell me anything, short of confessing to the Great Train Robbery or the Lufthansa heist. You can tell me anything in confidence, and I'll do what I can to solve that problem. I've even, believe it or not, I've even gone to jail to take people out of jail. Isn't that odd? What year is this? I go to jail and pick people up. Usually it's the other way around. We take people there. But if they're going into a program or we have an alternative resolution to them, a very minor offense, then I can sometimes take them out of jail, takes a court order. Not that difficult. It takes a little forward thinking and some prosecutors and public defenders that are willing to see your point of view, but it does work quite well. We'll talk about that in a future show as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not taking bank robbers out there and setting them free. We're not coddling criminals. We're just assisting those who... Jail is a very expensive homeless shelter. My community is about $150 a night, so it gets expensive. If you're a bank robber, yeah, you deserve to be in there. And we have a housing plan for you. It's called federal prison. But if you're a very minor offender, just trying to fulfill basic needs, then maybe there are better resolutions. And I spent the last 8 years figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So if you would like to know what works for your community, give me a call. Some future issues we're going to talk, particularly this is a big legal decision, Boise versus Martin in the 9th U.S. Circuit out west. If you do not know what that decision is, it's regarding the criminalization of homelessness. You should, particularly if you have laws that govern sleeping, storage of property, camping, etc., anything like that. So we'll talk about that in future episodes. Some other issues I'm looking forward to are homeless pet policies. Many of you will see the homeless out there with pets, support animals, etc. Kind of the most common question I get is, well, if they're homeless, they can't take care of their own needs, how could they be responsible for an animal? And that's interesting. Well, I researched that. I asked our local pet resource center here where I work, and they said that the homeless actually statistically take care of their animals better than non-homeless because it's the only thing they have, and that will unconditionally support them no matter what. We'll be talking to Bonnett over in England in the future. She led a campaign after her friend John Chadwick committed suicide. This was a tragic event. He was offered permanent supportive housing. He had some pretty serious mental health issues and other issues, and he could not bring his pets with him into permanent housing. He ended up committing suicide. I ended up writing a blog on that. It's called Housing Gone Wrong, The Life and Death of John Chadwick. Last time I checked, it's been read in about 150 countries around the world. Dee has been a tireless campaigner on this issue. She has appeared before her town council. She has gone to London to lobby the elected officials there. Amy Varle, Winston Churchill Memorial Scholar, a friend of mine in Manchester, has also assisted with the cause, as has many others. We'll have Amy on and talk about particularly the private sector role and some of her very innovative projects. And I promise her, as soon as I get all the technical bugs sorted out of my podcast, she's going to be the first guest on my show. I think we're pretty close to doing that. So if you're listening or watching Amy, hopefully I will be in touch in the near future. If we can get over the time difference, etc., we'll get you on here pretty soon. Some upcoming events I wanted to just shout out. Tomorrow I'm going to be going to one of our local charities and homeless missions, where I'm going to meet Noah, who is a 6-year-old. He's in 4th grade, I think, and he will be, I think, 6 or 8. My apologies if I got your age wrong, Noah. And he took it upon himself to use his own money to help give out blankets to the homeless, and I've got invited to meet him tomorrow. And anyway, take a listen or watch here on YouTube.
Turn into a whole lot of good, especially when you have the heart and determination of Noah Villa-Wright. Like most of us here, he noticed over the last couple of weeks that it's been cold out, right? But instead of complaining about it, the 8-year-old turned it into an opportunity to help. 10 News reporter Madison Allworth met with Noah and his family as they were distributing blankets to homeless community members, a simple idea that has turned into a big project.
Thank you so much, Noah.
You're welcome.
Noah knows just how important a blanket can be.
Well, I have a favorite blanket at home, and one night I just thought about the homeless and how they stay warm.
So he used his own money to buy 10 new ones.
Bye, Carlton.
All right, bye, Noah. I love you, man.
You too.
And after his mom posted about his hope to buy more blankets, things grew.
The response has been truly incredible. We've raised over $800. We have about 120 blankets.
Noah and his family have been distributing blankets since Friday.
Because they deserve a house and to be warm as much as we do.
Thanked with a smile, shake, and sometimes a word of encouragement.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, brother.
You too. I feel like I'm really making a difference in their lives, and hopefully they'll use this for a long time.
Well past his goal of 10 blankets, Noah has no intention of slowing down.
Now when I'm using my blanket, I try to think about the people that I helped and what they're doing at this moment with it. And then I think about the people that I could give blankets to and what they're doing.
That is so inspiring there. What a beautiful story. The family continues to keep buying blankets as more donations continue to come in.
And like I said, I'll get to meet Noah tomorrow on Wednesday. I have to commend him. A 4th grader decided he wants to help the homelessness in our community. That sort of is a good segue to my next segment. I talk about particularly I call this this is a theory I developed, my pyramid of social inertia. Had an interesting conversation, or I guess not conversation, but some tweets with Mark Horvath from Invisible People, and invisiblepeople.tv. They got some very compelling stories on there of real people, or the invisible people as he describes. Mark does a live YouTube webcast on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. and you can see him on Invisible People on YouTube. So anyway, our discussion was about whether we should be giving out stuff to the homeless, such as tents, blankets, etc. That was the discussion. We have the issue we have is the charity response to homelessness and the problem-solving response to homelessness. I want to go into that here in a second when we get back up to. I'm going to go through this pyramid here and explain it, and then a little bit thoughts about Mark's discussion and I. Anyway, this is my theory. Ultimately, your community has to determine what your priorities are. Is it maintaining the status quo, which is most communities, and this is if you're listening to the podcast, not viewing this on YouTube, then I have a pyramid here at the base of the pyramid is red. I've got the sort of like a traffic light red for maintaining the status quo, which is do nothing. Many communities, unfortunately, do that. They deny that they have a problem, and it's like a traffic light red for you need to stop and look at what you're doing. In the middle is managing homelessness, which is yellow. You need to slow down, proceed with caution, and evaluate what you're doing. And at the top of the pyramid in green, representing the fewest communities, is ones that are committed to homeless solutions, and particularly development of housing. And some common responses to this is that in homelessness, it's not a police problem, and I get this quite a bit. It's not a police problem, particularly as a police officer. Well, you're absolutely right. It isn't a police problem, but in a perfect world, there wouldn't be crime. We wouldn't need the police. There wouldn't be homelessness. But the reality is, it's that homelessness, law enforcement, quality of life are all intersecting, and there are a few agencies out there. I won't say a whole lot, but it's getting more and more common that are devoting at least some of their resources to trying to solve the problem. Because ultimately, if making an arrest is, you're really only addressing the symptom of the problem, you're not addressing the underlying problem. So that's, I think, is an important issue, particularly if you're a police agency. And if you want to know how to have better outcomes to that, let me know. That's my bread and butter. Spend a lot of time doing this. One of my favorites, let someone else deal with it. If you're in a city, it's a county problem. If you're in a county, it's a city problem, or it's a state problem, or we're waiting for money from HUD. Until then, we can't do anything. It's a state problem. It's a charity problem. It's a homeless services problem. The passing the blame is very, very common in this sector. So that's one of the big issues. Next, going up to the criminalization of homelessness. As I said, if you are committing a minor crime or an ordinance violation for life-sustaining activity, then perhaps you can find better alternatives, and we can help you with better alternatives than going to jail. Now, there's a key distinction between the homeless that commit minor crimes or for life-sustaining activity or nuisance crimes versus criminals who happen to be homeless. It's night and day. So often they get confused. Believe me, as a police officer, I'm not coddling criminals. If you rob a bank and you are homeless, then you need to go to prison for that. Or that's really quite that simple. But if you're out there sleeping on the streets because you get no place to go, then maybe we can develop a better alternative to that. So if you're a police agency or a city, you should look at solving the problem rather than addressing the symptoms of the problem. Same thing with homelessness. Homelessness is not in itself a problem. It is a symptom of a problem. That can be affordable housing. It can be lack of jobs. It can be lack of income, lack of identification. I helped one gentleman get identification. We discovered he had $42,000 in the bank he was not aware of. He is no longer homeless. So that is my job, and that's my role as a problem solver. And that's what I do. Try to not criminalize homelessness. Going back to what I was alluding to earlier on this, the charity response to homelessness, which is filling needs. And this is, I think the charity response and the problem-solving response should coexist. Mark, I think, really kind of enlightened me and gave me a perspective on this that kind of allowed me to develop my point of view. Charity does not solve a problem, but it does fill a need. I think we have to be realistic in that we can't house everyone. We can, if you're out there helping one person at a time, two people, 10 people, it is better than helping no one. Particularly if you are helping their homelessness. In the meantime, if you're like Noah, who is fourth grade giving out blankets, then I applaud that, and I think the charity sector can coexist with the police and the homeless response system. But ideally, I would like to see the homeless sector respond better to getting more housing, etc. And ideally, my job is to put myself out of business. I don't think that's a realistic goal. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, but I want to, I'm done. There's no more homelessness. I'll go back to writing tickets and doing traffic crashes. So that's my goal one day. I don't think it'll happen, but in the meantime, the charity approach, there is room for that, as long as we respect each other's roles. And also, if you are filling needs, just keep in mind that you are filling needs. You are not solving a problem. I think there is a lot of room for the charity approach to also get into the homeless outreach approach. If you have a ministry, or if you are engaging the homeless or giving out supplies, hygiene items, tents, blankets, that's a good opportunity as well for the outreach sector, whether that be, they can learn that. I can teach anyone that wants to learn outreach to get out there and sort of kill two birds with one stone. Don't have an event totally devoted to handing out blankets, but have some of the outreach people there too, and kind of work on both aspects. So if you need help, we can kind of make it a full service type solution. So I appreciate Mark's input, very enlightened tweets last week, and I kind of developed more of an appreciation of his role, and so shout out to Mark. And if you'd like to be a guest sometime here on my podcast, can't guarantee you'll get any listeners, but you're welcome on here anytime. info@homelesspolice.com. Going down to warehousing the homeless, this kind of gets me going. Warehousing the homeless, this may increase now, particularly I think with the changes in Washington. I'm not going to get into the politics of the appointments in D.C. I really don't want to make this a political discussion. I want to keep it, I want to stay within the navigational buoys, as Riding the Wave with Dave says from one of my favorite shows. Shout out to him, America's Trucking Network, on Friday nights, Saturday nights, midnights to 5 on 700 WLW in Cincinnati. I listen online, but that's what we want to do here. I thank Dave for that. Keep it within the navigational buoys. So sometimes I can be guilty of going outside them in terms of warehousing the homeless. This is, I won't get involved in the politics of this, but this is very popular, particularly with elected officials, because it is a good way of hiding the homeless. Shoo them off to a remote location, often near a jail or in the outskirts of town. In my adjacent county, we have one of these, they're called Come As You Are shelters. They go by many different names. There's one in there's a few. There's one in San Antonio. There are or were building one in Daytona Beach, Florida. And they are, in my opinion, they are money pits. If it takes roughly about $1 million per permanent housing placement, at least the numbers I've looked at. And if you are homeless, if you go into one of these shelters, then you have roughly an equal chance of landing on the moon, or this roughly same lifetime chance of being struck by lightning. So those are not odds that I would take to the track anytime soon. Let me just ask you a question out there, anyone watching. If I could give you $1 million, which I'll give you monopoly money, but say you had $1 million, you can either spend that on a shelter to hide the homeless on the outskirts, or you can buy a ton of housing with that. Even Los Angeles, where it's expensive, you can at least get some decent mileage there for that. So I'm not a big fan of warehousing. They can go jail diversion shelters. Like anything else, there are good ways and bad ways to do jail diversion. Excuse me, I'll take a sip of my water there. If you want to know the difference on that, we're one of the high-performing communities on that for jail diversion, but jail diversion can sometimes refer to warehousing the homeless in shelters, which oftentimes used to be jail. So if you take a jail and turn it into a homeless shelter, well, what's the problem with that is it looks like a jail that's been converted into a homeless shelter. So my thoughts on that, maybe we will get into that more often. Of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to end homelessness. The only cure for homelessness, as Ian DeYoung says, is housing. You need to cure housing with homelessness. We have to be realistic that there is not enough housing to go around. And in that meantime, I'm going to shout out to Mark from Invisible People for at least making life on the streets a little more bearable. And for those out there experiencing homelessness, we need to keep working on this. We're moving the needle, sometimes not by much, but I think we're going in the right direction. With the exception of California, most communities are reducing homelessness. That's measured annually with the point-in-time count. That's a whole different subject for another program, is the pick count. But the needle seems to be moving in terms of lowering homelessness, except for in California. Of course, we want to, like I said before, we want to apply a problem-solving approach, probably in conjunction with a charity approach. If you want to, there'll always be some folks that will be managing homelessness versus those ending it. I think it's important that your community gets on the same page. If you disagree about your response and your community priorities, that is a kind of a concern in itself. If you're a municipality or a government and you believe that there is not a homeless problem, but you're a downtown merchant and you're affected by homelessness and you are yelling, do something, do something, do something, and it's like the ostrich with its head in the sand. Homeless doesn't exist. So if you cannot agree you have a problem, or that in itself is a problem in itself, and you have to kind of get on the same page on that. And I've led a few community discussions on that, about kind of where do we go and what is next. In terms of the housing first, I am part of coordinated entry. I use part of HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, so I can add people to coordinated entry, do assessments and triages. Not the same thing. Similar, but not the same. Many people think they are. Maybe we'll do that at some point. So you can't have communities or organizations working at opposite ends of the spectrum. You need a coordinated approach, and the sooner your community starts to coordinate your approach, then you are better off. And finally, address solutions. I guess I should rather say embrace solutions, not symptoms. Otherwise, you are just kicking the can down the road if you're just trying to wrest away the problem or shoo away everyone someplace else. And if you're particularly from the police point of view, if you're a police agency, then ideally that once you house a homeless person, you can basically, rather than if you got a call for service now with a homeless person, you can solve the problem, and you can also maybe prevent future problems, particularly from high need, high utilizers, what we would pejoratively refer to as frequent flyers. So if you're a police agency and you want more information about how you can develop a decent plan for homelessness, panhandling, whatever your issues are, certainly feel free to contact me and be glad to help you. So anyway, we're wrapping it up for this week. I'd like to thank everyone that tuned in. If you liked this, enjoyed it, please share, get the word out. Hopefully we can have guests, etc. Hope to do this weekly. I welcome your opinions, comments, etc. Let me know, info@homelesspolice.com if you like the show. Particularly if you absolutely think this is absolutely horrible and I'm never going to listen to this again, well, at least tell me why. And this is my first attempt, so have a heart, and I look forward to talking with you all very soon. Here's my contact information if you would like to contact me and let me know what you think, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks for listening or viewing, everyone. Bye.